Call the meeting of the Pajaro Valley Healthcare District to order at 7:03 p.m. Before we do a roll call, I do want to make an announcement that Director Gallagher has requested permission to attend remotely per AB 2449, which states that a board member may participate remotely for just cause should he or she have to be or be exposed to a contagious illness that will keep him or her from attending. I'd like to make a motion that Director Gallagher be able to attend remotely. Can I get a second on that? So move.
Director Pimentel?
Yes.
Director Cox? Yes. Director Canasta?
Yes.
And Chair Negus?
Yes, and Director Gallagher, for the Assembly Bill, I have to ask if there's anyone in the room with you over the age of 18.
No one at all.
Great, Rosie, if you could please roll call.
Yes. Director Pimentel?
Here.
Director Cox? Here. Director Canasta?
Here.
Director Gallagher?
Here.
Here.
And Chair Negus?
Here. We have nothing to report from our closed session. Any agenda modifications for consideration from staff? No, none from staff. So I will open up the public comment for items that are not on this agenda. Any public comments online, Rosie, for items not on the agenda?
No, hands raised online.
Any public comment? Same
question. I don't know if it's applicable right now.
You can ask the question, but we wouldn't,
You'll let me know.
yeah.
Well, my question is this, is that I understand that you're considering a external affiliate partnership.
Mhm.
I would like to make sure that what is in consideration is that I'd like to know.
That item is item number 4. So when that presentation happens, it will open that up to public comment.
Okay.
You can make a comment then.
All right.
Any other public comments on items not on the agenda? Okay. I'll go ahead and close the public comment. Any comments from the board before we get into our consent calendar?
I'll mention what we heard earlier today, that there's a save the date for our hospital's first gala event on September 21st. So just stay tuned for more information. I'm eager to check it out.
Awesome. Any other comments before we get started? Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar. We have two items on the consent calendar for today. And item number 1 is minute approval for our May 29th and June 11th meeting. And the item number 2 is the financial officer monthly finance report, which we received that report in the hospital corporation meeting. Any comments or questions from the board of staff on these 2 items before we go out to public comment? Okay, seeing none. Rosie, any raised hands online?
No hands raised online.
Any public comment on these 2 items before we bring it back for a motion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
Move approval.
Second. Hey, Katie, one.
Director Pimentel?
Yes.
Director Cox? Yes. Director Canasta?
Yes.
Director Gallagher?
Yes.
Yes.
Chair Negus?
Yes. Okay, so we'll now move on to the public hearing for today. That's item number 3. It's a public hearing regarding proposed issuance of the Pajaro Valley Healthcare District by the Pajaro Valley Healthcare District of its general obligation bonds in 1 or more series in an amount not to exceed $61 million and approving related documents and actions. Steve, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give a brief intro and then I'll let Director Pimentel take it from there. So just some background really quick. On November 29th, 2023, the district board passed a resolution to place on the March 5th, 2024 ballot, a general obligation bond that became known as Measure N. On the March 5th election, the voters approved Measure N with 68.26% in favor. And so the resolution that we're going to talk about now approves the issuance of the first series of bonds under Measure N in the maximum principal amount of $61 million. Director Pimentel is going to take us through the The details. And you
Need to
get
drive
the,
today.
can you get the clicker?
Clicker. This is awesome. Good evening, for chair, staff, community members. My name is Mark Pimentel. I am the district treasurer. My day job is the county budget manager for Santa Cruz County. And you'll excuse me if I refer to different debt numbers because we just finished issuing about $105 million of debt to the county in the last 6 weeks. So debt is something I've been involved with a lot in my career, and some of this is kind of feels at home, even though it's big numbers. So please, bear with me if I rush through something quickly. Feel free to check me on questions. But my hope is to summarize the 87 pages that are in the board report and distill it down to about 6 slides that kind of provide the high level points and overview about what we're doing next with, as our CEO Steve Gray mentioned, March 5th voters approved by 68.3%. Measure in, which authorized $116 million in debt. So this is our first action to issue about half of that debt and start using some of that towards what we told the voters and what stakeholders have been telling us is our highest priorities for our community. So I just wanted to cover in 6 quick slides, kind of all those documents, 87 pages, that hopefully makes it a little more, distills it down. So talk a little bit about the overview of the financing, the overview of our financing, the projects that the first group of projects that we'll be using the first issue of debt for, some of the future actions that will include future debt, and then we'll finish with the recommendation, including our public hearing. So to do any debt issue as a government entity involves a lot of players, and there's a lot of opportunities as a government entity. We get to issue debt typically at a rate that's better than commercial markets go. If you're a commercial lender or a private resident and you try to get debt on a house, you're going to look at the 7% rate. If you're trying to get commercial debt, you might be 7, 9, 10, 11, 12%, depending on a lot of factors. Because we're a government entity, we get access to lower, cheaper debt, but there's a lot of hoops to get through. So what this slide talks about is it takes a team to pull together a government debt issue. And the advantage of a team is we get to maximize all those different opportunities to, in the end, issue the lowest cost debt for our taxpayers so that we can be more prudent and adhere to our fiscal responsibilities to be smart with all the taxpayers and our own board's resources. So our team has we formed an ad hoc committee that has continued working following the passage of Measure N towards the steps of how do we issue our first batch of debt. It's typical when voters authorize 116 million that we might do 2 or 3 different bond issues to get to that 116 amount. What we're talking about today is 61 million. So that leaves 55 million left on the table for future action. So Chair Nunez and myself have been on the board ad hoc committee, and we've pulled together a team that's really, I appreciate the staff who said, okay, here's a team we recommend and from some of our past experiences, we pulled together what I call kind of a all-star best team. And these are players that I only get to work with at times, who I want to work with at all the time in my day job. So I'm really excited to have with us today our CEO, Chief Operating Officer, our Chief Financial Officer, all the staff who've been a part of this. There's staff behind the scenes, Jessica, Chad, who've been at many of our meetings. BBK is our district's legal counsel. They've been with us since the beginnings. They've been here to advise us. But to get to the point of issuing debt, we also have today online members of our financial advisory team, John Isom, the principal in Isom Investors, and Wing C. Falk from Urban Futures. They're really 2 industry specialists in issuing government obligation bonds that our voters approve and issuing governmental bonds that we're approving. So we got 2 really experts helping us pull this together. And thank you, Scott, for driving down today. Our bond legal counsel, Scott Ferguson, is here from Jones Hall. So I'll finish the presentation, and if there are questions by our board, we have more resources here who can help answer those questions. And if you want to know what the term underwriter is, you can look it up. I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards. We have an underwriter who's here. They serve 2 primary roles. Stiefel, Nicholas and Company. Eileen Gallagher is our lead on the underwriter. their primary role is to guarantee that they'll buy our bonds. They kind of work as like, if nobody buys their debt, they'll buy it at a rate that we set. But they also help us structure the deal so that it becomes the most advantageous to the market. In the end, this is not going to Bank of America and getting a house loan. It's us selling debt to the private market and trying to make us look as best as possible so we get 12 different investors who want to buy our debt, and they start competing, and they compete to buy our debt at lower rates. So the underwriter plays a really important role to helping us market our debt to the private sector. So that's our team, and I'm really proud of the team that's been here. We've done a lot of good work, and we've been meeting very regularly to pull this together. So today's actions kind of started, as Steve mentioned, it started with voters approving Measure N on March 5th that authorized $116 million of debt. Since then, the ad hoc committee has really been working with our financing team to structure the first pool of the debt. So we've asked the board today in the recommendation to authorize $61 million of that debt to be issued. We think the cash will show up in September, and we'll have that on hand to start doing stuff with. To issue debt to government market, which gives us a lower interest rate, we'll have to hold a public hearing. That's what today is. Today is a scheduled board action, but also a public hearing. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to chime in online or chime in public, just to ask more questions to make sure they fully understand what we're doing. Following the public hearing, it'll come back to the board for final action, in which we authorize up to 61 million. We authorize an interest rate not to exceed 7%, but we might issue 60 million, we might issue 55 million, but that's our maximum authority of 61 million. And the interest rate not to go over 7%. We think the actual market rate will be closer to 5, but that sets the ceiling on our exposure. So we know we won't be above 7, and we expect the actual rate when investors start buying it to be around the 5% mark. And I know Winksy and John, they're probably cringing at me, simplifying this at this level, but this is how I view it through my own eyes. So that's the financing overview. What we'll be using, so we told community in Measure N collectively, we do a lot of things. 61 million doesn't do all those things, but it gets us a start. So really what we want to do with the first issue of 61 million is go to work on buying the buildings and land back that were sold out from underneath this community, and then starting the project design and planning for the emergency space renovation work. So that won't be constructing and building it, it'll be planning and designing it, so then we'll be ready to go. We also want to do some upgrades of other equipment. We have things that we might do, security system improvements. We've listed in the board report, they're summarized here. There's some other common space improvements we might want to tackle. There's radiology, HVAC, roof upgrades. There's a lot of small work that in the $61 million might come up to be a higher priority in the next 6 months. So things might move up the ladder a little bit, but this is where we think we're going to spend most of the money. The bulk of it is going to go into buying the land and buildings back and starting the design work on emergency projects. So that kind of leaves really the 87 pages of what's in the board packet. And following today's action, some of the next steps are support ready, get ready, because July 31st, we'll receive more bond documents. We'll be finalizing the form of a lot of these disclosure documents. There's a lot of requirements for us to issue the debt, including finalizing our offering statement that goes to the public and is kind of our marketing brochure to investors to buy our debt. We also told the committee and we told our community, and then the ballot measure authorized and mandates that we have to form a citizens oversight committee. So once we start, using those proceeds, we've got to report to the Citizens Oversight Committee what we're doing with it, which means we've got to form a Citizens Oversight Committee. So that's going to be an action plan coming soon, and we need we haven't mapped a timeline on that, but I suspect in the next 2 months we'll be starting an application process and get that rolling. Following that, when we sell the bonds to the market and the market gives us what we think is going to be about $61 million. We'll start working on the design of the emergency department. We'll start working negotiations on buying the land back, and we'll start some of the other project work. And then after all that's kind of done, we still have work to do. What are we going to do with the next 55 million? So today we're getting 61 million. We have 55 left on the vote authorized amount that would go towards building out the rest of building the project, the emergency emergency room and some of the other things we told voters we would look at. So that's kind of what's next after today, priority items. A lot of the little stuff, those are the big work areas. So that would conclude my presentation. Again, we have, we can see John Isom, Scott Ferguson, our bond counsel. We have folks here who, if there are questions on the board packet, if there's questions on something I said that maybe didn't make sense, and I'm certainly happy to have them clarify anything I may have said otherwise. Following our questions by the board, we officially will open the public hearing, take public comment, and then come back to the board for final action. So hopefully that concludes my presentation, and hopefully that made sense.
Any questions from the board of myself, Marcus, or any of the members of our team here today? And Joe, I don't see you, so I'll let you go first if you'd like to start.
This is really an advantage, nothing on the screen. Thanks, Tony. I'm sort of thrilled as a comment to see that Measure N in action. As far as the Bond Oversight Committee, my previous impression was they were also going to be involved in how the money was spent, not just that we spent it for the things we said, but the deciding which items got priority. So that's really just a question that could be answered later. And then looking at the documents, maybe that's the next part. I couldn't tell the difference between the 501c3 bonds and what were considered government bonds. And I don't know if there's a substantial difference that we need to know about, but if there is at some point, I'd like to get an answer if that's later in the presentation. Those are my two questions.
Yeah, I can speak to that. Thank you, Joe. Actually, I meant to talk about that, and it's right here on my slide deck and in my notes. But as I mentioned, we have a lot of opportunity to fill debt in different components. One of them is called 501c3, which is a category that allows us with a little less, provides more flexibility to do taxable and non-taxable debt, although the interest rate might be a touch higher than if we did government bonds. So what the actions that we're authorizing today is to let our underwriters, let our financial advisors, let our team kind of work and put together the elements of which debt or what portions of the property make the most sense. For example, we have a lot of users on our property. We have nonprofits who are on the hospital property. We have government entity that's now on the hospital property. We have private doctors who are on the hospital property. So some of the debt can't be used for some of those elements. For example, if we were to issue non-taxable governmental debt, we can't use it for space as a commercial use. So we've got to put together all those Lego parts in a way that gives us the most flexibility, again, with the angle of getting the lowest interest rate. So, we can see Aline, I know you're there, you're probably cringing, but I'll certainly let you clarify anything I may have missed.
Yeah, this is Eileen Gallagher. I can answer maybe if you'd like. I'm Stifel. I'm with Stifel. I'm the bond underwriter, the financing. And one of the elements we've been considering is whether or not the bonds would be issued as governmental or 501c3. There's a few variables here at play. One is the level of interest rates in the market. We will be talking to a rating agency next month. And so based on that, we'll be getting a bond rating back, some feedback there. And we'll also be talking to bond insurers. So there's a fair amount of unknowns at this point in terms of what the rating is going to be for the bonds, if any, and what have you. So there's all of these are subject to change, and that's partly why we're coming back at the end of July. At this point, we think there's a slightly higher interest rate for 501c3 bonds versus governmental bonds, but because of the use of proceeds are different under the tax laws for those two categories of bonds, a higher percentage of the bond issue would have to be taxable. So between the two factors, one option has a higher percent of taxable debt versus tax exempt, but a lower borrowing cost. The other has for the tax exempt debt. On the other side, it's a smaller amount of taxable, but a slightly higher cost on the tax exempt. So they end up being not that far apart numerically. And so that's one of the, it's not a compelling driver. And so it's really, the interest rates themselves are not going to necessarily be the driving factor. It's flexibility, and this is for the district going forward and in how those facilities are used and complying with tax rules. So there's a fair amount of things that we're just walking through with the lawyers and the district staff to make sure we're making an informed decision on all of the items.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions of myself, Marcus, or the team before we go out for public comment? Okay, so we'll now take public comment on this, and if there are questions, feel free to ask the question, and then we as a board will then, you know, come back in the discussion and ask that question of staff. So any public comment online, Rosie? Any raised hands? Okay, any public comment on this item? People, go ahead, Mitch.
I don't know if this is appropriate either, but where does the money come from that pays all these people, the underwriters and the legal consultants and all that? Does that come out of the?
Yeah. When the voters approved Measure N, they also authorized putting a tax on properties across the district. So the county will start collecting tax revenue a year from now, so not this next tax cycle, but the one following. So in 2025-6, the taxpayers will see on their bill a tax for the district, and that will bring in the revenue that will pay the debt service on it.
This question was about paying the professionals.
Yeah, they're included in the entire cost, so part of the use of the bond proceeds, a portion of it is kept in reserve to pay for our consultants. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Any other, Fred?
My question had to do with something that Joe said, is that on the oversight committee, when is that supposed to be put together?
Believe over the next 2 months.
It might be a little.
Might be a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'm working, can I?
Of course,
Can I-
yeah.
Hi, Fred. So I'm currently working with with our district council to write the bylaws for the oversight committee. Understanding and using templates from cities and counties locally that have had oversight committees as well. And once that's written, we'll have to have the bylaws approved here at the board. And once that's done, then we will design and develop the process for identifying the people who will be on that oversight committee. So 2 months is probably aggressive. It might take a little bit more than that, but we won't have the money or have spent any of the money by then anyway. So we're by the end of the year, I would say, but I don't know exactly.
In a year?
By the end of this
By the end of
calendar
the
year, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would be my question, is that oversight committee should be completed before anything is finally decided. Which is what you're saying.
So I'm working with council on making sure that we have all the timing correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other public comment on this matter? Not, Rosie, last checked online, doesn't look like any reason. So then I will close the public hearing, take any comments from the board about this item before I ask or entertain a motion, the resolution before us.
I'll just comment. I said in the beginning, I recognize good work, and I know that probably people will watch this say, well, that guy just thanks everybody, but I really when I say this, like, this team is working, so grateful at the level of detail. And there's a lot of documents we're working through, and, you know, we're the board seen, the community seen an 87-page packet report. We've probably reviewed over 900 pages, different versions of it, of a lot of documents. So, and we're getting ready to do reg agency presentations. I mean, it's just a lot of work to do debt in this manner. And I'm just grateful that our team is fully engaged. And I don't know how, but doing incredible work. So thank you to everybody.
And if I
Any
may,
other comments? Oh, go ahead, Wingsy.
board chair, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. The only thing to add in, Marcus, you did a great job. You hit on everything I would have hit on. But just to say, you know, who would have thought less than a year ago we hashed this vision with you and thinking about this bond program? to fund these critical capital needs of the hospital. We asked the question, are we going to get the support from my voters? And here we are now. It's really exciting. Voters said yes, which is really just a continued testament to all the great work that you all do. And there's that continued deep community support for the hospital. So yeah, we're just happy to be on this team. Happy to report that we're about ready to sell the first series. Thank you.
Thank you, Wincy.
Any other comments before we entertain a motion for this? If there are none, just from me, just echo everything that Wincy and Marcus said. Unlike Marcus, this is not my wheelhouse, you know, issue debt and all of this stuff. And so I'm communications, I'm messaging, all that sort of stuff. And so this has been a huge educational piece for me from the beginning of this, after Measure N was approved and then starting this work. And I just appreciate everyone on the team, you know, Eileen, Wincy, Marcus, Scott, just thank you for driving down here, being here in person, and all of our staff as well too, who have answered all the questions that I've had really, and that made me really comfortable and have been very flexible with the timing and the workload of our staff as well too. Because while we're doing all this incredible work with this item, with another item that's coming forward after this, they're still making somehow the hospital stay upright. And so just really appreciative of the work, and once again, appreciative of the voters for voting yes on Measure N and allowing us to do this and trusting us with their you know, hard-earned dollars to invest back into this community and back into the hospital. So just thank you to everyone all around. And I'll if there's no other comments, I'll entertain a motion on today's resolution, and that is, I'll reread it again. To adopt the resolution authorizing the first authorizing the general obligation bonds of one or more series in an amount not to exceed $61 million, and approving the related documents and actions before us today. Anyone want to make history?
So moved.
Got a first from Marcella and a second from Joe.
Yes.
All right. Director,
Absolutely.
Director Goff? Yes. Director Devonta?
Yes.
Director Gallagher?
Yes.
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 All right.
Awesome. All right. So now we'll move on to our discussion items, to item number 4. It's the Pajaro Valley Healthcare District External Partnerships Ad Hoc Committee Guiding Principles. So I'm going to start, and then maybe I pass over and Steve will do the first half of the presentation, then I'll take up the final slides. This is building on the presentation that we had at the May 29th meeting about our guiding principles, and also the work of the ad hoc committee for external partnerships. See if I can make this work. All right. So Steve, if you want to continue here, and then I'll take on the second half.
Yeah, sure. So we've already talked a lot today about the first two stools, or the first two legs of the stool here for long-term sustainability of the hospital. So we have we purchased the operations of the hospital back, created the healthcare district. We have our financial turnaround plan that is moving along well and in the right direction. And then we got Measure N approved, and we just approved the first series of bonds. So leg 3 of this long-term sustainability stool is really about investing in our services, and how can we create more services, bring more providers to our community, to our healthcare system here in the Pajaro Valley Healthcare District, and some ways that we might be able to partner to be able to do that. So why would we partner? How does this benefit the community? Well, it's all about how it benefits the community, right? So it's about how we enhance the quality of care. Can we bring more advanced technologies into our services? Can we bring more healthcare services into what we do, so that we can serve more patients, so that we can keep more patients here in our community? And can we bring more physicians into our community? This is something that we are currently doing, and there may be ways we can get some help to recruit physicians and providers into our community. So things are moving in the right direction financially. We talked about that. I've got a graph here coming up in a second that will show that a little bit more. And we know that we face headwinds financially. So we have 85% or so of our patients, as Julie reported on earlier, have Medicare or Medi-Cal, and those tend to reimburse us less than we spend in order to take care of those patients. And so as our community continues to age, as it continues to grow, how do we ensure financially that we're able to continue to grow with our community and provide all the services that we need to? So our consolidated financial performance has improved incredibly over the last 2 years. So 2022 was mostly under previous ownership. The district took over the final 4 months of 2022 with a $30 million loss. The first full year of district ownership was a $13 million loss, so a $17 million improvement. That was behind the strategic plan. So the strategic plan thought we were going to instantly get to just a $4.5 million loss, which we almost got there, but didn't quite get there. This year, as Julie reported earlier, we're at break even for the first 5 months of the year. And the strategic plan, even with the successful bond measure, had predicted that we would be at a $4.2 million loss. So we're ahead of the plan for 2024, which is wonderful. And that strategic plan, has us getting into the positive territory within the next couple of years. We hope that we'll do it sooner. And it shows that in the longer term, we still have some financial headwinds in terms of costs growing faster than our revenues and reimbursements will. So we have an opportunity to continue to accelerate the financial growth trajectory that we've had. And how can we leverage some other community partners to be able to do that? And in order to do that, we are really committing, and this board is really committing to maintaining community ownership. So that will not change. Tony will go through the guiding principles, and it's really centered around long-term sustainability. Is based on maintaining community ownership and maintaining the public entity and the public trust.
All right, thanks, Steve. So I'm going to go ahead. So for those of you who are here for the May meeting, you'll recognize this slide. I'll go through from the beginning of the ad hoc committee to where we're at right now and the work that we've been doing. So way back in March, shortly after Measure N passed, we established an ad hoc committee for external partnerships. And appointed myself and Director Gallagher as the representatives for the board. Throughout the month of April and into mid-May, the ad hoc committee met several times to discuss partnerships, to discuss the process of setting up a potential partnership, the regulations that we have to adhere to as a public entity, the timing of it, the goals, and our structure, among other things. And then on May 15th, after learning about all of the process and the best way to do this, that included a lot of public input, that included a lot of community outreach, and a lot of public oversight, we decided to move forward with drafting and creating a request for proposals, an RFP. And before doing that, before drafting the RFP, going out and putting together a list of guiding principles that would inform the RFP. So putting together the guiding principles was essentially our way as an ad hoc committee, as a community, to come together and understand what the guardrails are, what we deem as acceptable for a potential partnership, and what we're looking for in a potential partner. On May 29, we brought our guiding principles to the board and presented it publicly for feedback. And so we got some really great feedback from the general public during that meeting, and from our staff as well too, about the guiding principles, And we've made several additions and several edits to them since then. And we've also started working on the RFP on the very first early draft of it, so that we can do what we're doing today. And that is bringing forward the guiding principles for approval. And then also bringing forward the first really early draft of our request for proposals for review and input from the board and the public. So since that May meeting, we've had several presentations, a lot of focus groups, a lot of meetings with our community partners and our government partners. That includes our South County Triage Group, which is a group of nonprofit and human services providers throughout the Pajaro Valley that formed during the COVID-19 pandemic and that has been meeting regularly every other week for the past year or so. Another subset of that smaller group, which is the PV Leaders Group, and that's some of the chief executives from our nonprofit partners, our health and our health services agency leaders, and also for our county and our city leaders as well too. We also held 2 hospital employee town halls just last week, and we got some really great feedback from that, both there in person. We got some great questions, and then also some emails as well too that really helped inform the process and the RFP and the guiding principles. We met with our Med Exec committee last week. We had a Watsonville Community Hospital focus group of some staff members a couple weeks ago. And then we met, like I said, with our County of Santa Cruz leadership, the CAO's office, a couple of our board of supervisors that oversee the South County area, and then also some of our leadership from the city of Watsonville to inform them and allow them to provide feedback and keep them appraised of what we're doing. So the feedback received from essentially from May 29th all the way up until today is the number one, and the prevailing one is do not sell the hospital. And another one that we got from a great email from staff is to not only not sell the hospital, but to not sell out as well too. And so that means it's one thing to hold on to the hospital to, eventually when we finalize the purchase of the buildings and the land for the hospital, that we don't sell out the hospital and outsource our management, outsource the direction, oversight, and all those components of what was the initial vision for this hospital in the healthcare district when it was established 2 years ago. The other feedback that we received is that all partnerships have to add value and work for the community. So even outside of the walls of the hospital, it has to add value for the community and for everyone that receives healthcare services from Watsonville Community Hospital, but also that is influenced by the social determinants of health of our community. So anything that we can choose or that we can implement to make a positive impact on those social determinants of health for our community to improve health outcomes for people, that's something to also keep in mind as we're going through this process. The other one was to find ways to strengthen and protect union and non-union staff. That was a really big feedback that we got as we started talking to not only people within the hospital, but people outside as well too, is to really strengthen those relationships within the walls of the hospital. To be thorough, transparent, and thoughtful about how we review the proposals, and I'll touch more on that on a future slide or an upcoming slide. And then to go out and gather more community feedback in meaningful ways. And I'll also touch on that in a upcoming slide. And once people were educated on the process and what we're doing and what the hopes are and what the goals are of this, people were really appreciative of the work of the committee and the board. I think people started to understand about, what our goals are and what our goals are not, and started to come around, and rightfully so. I think Dr. Gallagher said are at a yellow still on a light scale of red to yellow to green of fully invested into this process. And we want people to be in that yellow, is to be skeptical as we're moving forward and provide that community input and that feedback for us as we go through this process over the next few months. So these are the guiding principles, and I'll go through them on 4 slides, and these are the ones for approval. They're included in our packet. and also included in the RFP. All of these were revised over the last month and strengthened from the feedback that we got from the community and from our meetings throughout the last month. I'm not going to go over them one by one, but as we go back and entertain a motion or just have general discussion for the board, if you'd like me to go back to a certain slide or to any one of these, we can definitely do that. So a lot of them stayed the same, or quite a few of them, I should say, changed from the previous for the previous iteration. Some of them were wholesale changes, like the addition of, if I could go back to this one, number one is the arrangements must align with the mission, vision, and values of the district of Watsonville Community Hospital. I think there's some really important holdovers from the last one that changed, for a couple words here and there, which is the integrity of independence will be maintained. The name of the hospital will remain unchanged throughout the term of the partnership. Also number 7 was one that was a holdover for the last one that had like very small refinements, but just that we want to maintain ownership of all property and assets throughout this. Number 10, we got some really great feedback from Director Cox about having people and community first wording in our public disclosure. And so number 10 reflects that as we'll continue to provide information to the public, allowing further input into the future direction of the district and hospital. And some of the other ones just saw some minor revisions and touch-ups and strengthening from the last from the input that we received over the last month. So really quickly on the request for proposals, the hope is that these following 4 to 5 months, and really 6 months, if I think about it, all the way through to the end, where we might have a contract to review in public session and then to approve. We hope that this is going to be an open and collaborative process. So number one goal is transparency through all of this. So, and to that, throughout this RFP process, all the proposals that come in are going to be property of the district. And so they will be subject to the California Public Records Act. And so anyone could make a Public Records Act request, and then we'll have to turn over some of those documents for public review. Our plan is that we want to go a step further, and there are some guidelines that we have to follow as a public agency as well too. So all of the proposals that we receive and decide to move forward with are going to be presented and considered in the public eye. We're working on communications planning of how we can include a lot of community input, some additional meetings into the process over the next few months, so that we can have an open and collaborative process and have discussion about that. And so keep an eye out for that. And then it's important that as we're going through this, that we're not just having transparency for transparency's sake and transparency because this is what we're supposed to do as a public board, but it's my opinion, and I think that of Dr. Gallagher as well too, and I'll open it up for him as well too here. But the community oversight and the input, especially that we received over the last month, the thoughts, the feelings, the concerns about the process have really helped to strengthen this process and have us think more deeply about the next 6 months, and then just external partnerships in general. Joe, any feedback or anything you wanted to add to that or to this slide before we move on?
No, just to sort of comment about the process, Tony. It's a kind of a ditto on the things as the public input. People thought of stuff we hadn't thought of, and it's here. It's been incorporated. So I think this is a living process, and I appreciate all the work you've done in this. So that's all I'd have to say.
So want to make very clear that the request for proposals to RFP that we've made available for folks to pick up at the door, that's available online as well too. It's a very, very, very early draft. And so we wanted to really put the skeleton out there, give some of the important facts, give some of the themes, the guardrails in there, and the overall vision of what an external partnership would look like. And now we can start that conversation. Now we can go with our senior level staff and have them really pick it apart. We can go to the community, have them pick it apart. We can go to our partners, have them pick it apart, so that we can strengthen this and have it be a really collaborative and open process, and have something that we all feel comfortable with sending out to potential external partners, both for what we're looking for in a partner and then what we're not looking for in a partner. Some really high-level highlights of this 14-page document, which I'm sure over the next month or so is going to expand to a few more pages, I would imagine, is that it really emphasizes community control, ownership, and oversight of the hospital. So that's throughout the entire RFP. That's one of the themes of the RFP. It incorporates all the input that we received from the board, from the previous meeting, from the community, from staff, and from the partners, as we've gone around and made presentations and talked to folks as well too. We're really encouraging creativity, innovation, and the fact that we have the ability to engage with multiple partners and not just looking for one partner that will come in and do everything that we're looking for. And then it builds upon the strategic planning efforts and sustainability roadmap that the district and set out and established at the beginning of the district's birth. So to Steve's point, all of the work that we've been doing is trying to mirror, if not, and with some exceptions here and there, of the financial sustainability roadmap that we laid out 2 years ago, so that we can gauge ourselves from that. And the next step, from purchasing the hospital to getting Measure N approved to do the needed improvements within the hospital, is to find ways to partner with our community and other partners, so that we can continue to build our sustainability, to build the sustainability and continue down the road that we identified at the beginning of this 2 years ago, and continue to offer better services and more services to our community. And so I think, yeah, so this is the next steps in the process. So throughout this summer, what we're going to do is we're going to get more feedback on the request for proposals from our community, from our partners, from our staff. We're going to incorporate that feedback and further shape the RFP. And then we'll bring it back to the board for review and for consideration. Late summer, early fall, when we have approved the RFP, we'll then send it out to potentially interested external partners. And then into the fall and deep into the winter, we'll be doing everything that if we receive a proposal that we deem and that the board wants to further explore, then we'll start doing that as well too. And so, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, from the beginning in March, all the way until we have a finalized contract, will be a 9-month or more process. December is really the earliest I think that we'll have something set in stone and anything to approve from the board and move forward on. So I think that's the last slide of this. So open it up for questions before from the board to myself, to Dr. Gallagher, to staff as well too, about just overall process, about the guiding principles that are before us today for approval, and then I'll open it up for public comment. Any questions, any comments, and I'm happy to go back to any of the guiding principles for any tweaking. Any?
I've got some opening comments, and I think it was this item that got me to really appreciate being on the other side of the Brown Act. So my whole career I've been working in government and been on the staff side and watching elected officials struggle with the Brown Act. And having this item come up at the last board meeting really brought to light the power of the Brown Act and the purposes there. And what I mean by that is 2 of our fellow board members purposely were working on this with staff. And it's hard to not be involved in some of that creation, not being in the kitchen creating this, and to receive it just as our members of the public at the last month was really, it was kind of shocking at the thought of all the different directions it could go. And I was really grateful that we had so many members of the public and our staff who were here provided comments, and my brain kept yelling at me. One half wanted to yell and scream and say, "What the hell are we? What are we doing? You know, we've got enough on our plate." And the other part of me was just screaming, like, trust the process. You know, we've got smart people all around us. We've got the right intentions. Trust the process. So I was finding, just again, as the purpose of the Brown Act is to ensure that we're not collaborating on decision making. And that was just a perfect example of the struggle it is being an elected official and have to deal with the Brown Act and, you know, trusting the process. So I'm really grateful that Tony, you and Joe and staff, you know, listened and took in the input. I love that we're protecting explicitly the Watson Community Hospital name. I'm grateful that we had so many people commented about, like, we've had so much turnover in management. Let's not consider another scenario where we might have more management turnover. Now we're explicitly calling that out. We'll not consider changing management. So I'm grateful in the work you've shown and presented today demonstrates the process is good. The people here have the right intentions. I'm glad to see the work that's been done, and I didn't really appreciate how much work had been done until I saw that slide. And that's also another part of it, like, because of the Brown Act, we can't be involved in those community presentations. So just trusting that those are being done well, and so I'm recognizing all the lifting that's been going on. So thank you.
Yeah, and just for the work of the ad hoc committee, you know, that process, like you said, Marcus, you can't be involved because it would, you know, be officially a Brown Act meeting, and so we'd have to open it up to the public and everything like that. The intention, though, is if it is, you know, the will of the community, and we want to have that input, especially as we're improving the RFP over the next month or however long it takes to get to the finalized one, is that if we deem that we need a special meeting sometime this coming month to do that, you know, we're more than happy to do that. If we want to, you know, try to schedule a town hall or something like that, you know, we can have discussions about that, right? And having just really preliminary discussions with, you know, folks over at the city of Watsonville, they've been very open to that as well too. Is if you guys need a larger venue, if you guys want something like that, then we're happy to work with you. Just reach out whenever you need help. So that's still a possibility to improve the process and to improve the RFP, which is what the ultimate goal is, right? We want this RFP to be very specific, to be very clear about what we deem important, and you know, what we're trying to do strategically to improve the hospital. So yes, a lot of work, and that's why I made the comment earlier from the previous one. I don't know how, you know, staff is doing this, but yeah. but they are, and so I appreciate the work. Any other questions or comments, just before we open up for public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll open up public comment on this matter. Rosie, any raised hands online? Hey, we can. Yeah. Okay. Anyone wishing to speak on this item for public comment today?
You answered all of my questions with your presentation.
Okay. Any?
I want to drag this down. I just wanted to say how appreciative I am and how the transparency is such a huge issue. And when you brought up the town hall, I think that's an excellent idea to be explored.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yep. Okay, if no other public comment, Rosie, just a last check for hands online, none? Okay, so just a reminder, what is before the board today is to pass a motion approving a guiding principles for the external partnership request for proposals. So if there's no other comments from the board, I'll entertain a motion for the guiding principles.
I'll move approval. I'll move approval, guiding principles.
I'll second.
Joe, before we go to roll call, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I was just raising my hand as a also someone who would make the motion.
Director Pimentel?
Yes.
Director Cox? Yes. Director Canasta?
Yes.
Director Gallagher?
Yes.
Chair Jenkins?
Yes. Passes unanimously. And, okay, that'll adjourn our meeting. Thank you so much to everyone in attendance and, have a good night.